Warning: this show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewers' discretion is advised. This show may contain strong language and sensitive or controversial topics. We are not attorneys and are not providing legal advice. The views and conversations are our own thoughts and feelings, and therefore, purely speculation.
The entertainment world and beyond.
Skywalker air miles, feeding on a surface, gliding on water, constricted and conflicted.
Welcome to Purely Speculation, a show that exposes the harmful effects of the criminal legal system. I'm your host, Heather Lewis, the Executive Director of the Reuniting Family Bail Fund and practitioner of Participatory Defense. On this show, you'll learn about the unspoken horrors of the criminal justice system and meet fierce allies and advocates. We will make the best of our traumatic experiences. We will get angry. We may even cry. We most certainly going to laugh, but one thing's for sure, we're going to keep it real. Welcome to Purely Speculation.
When they free my sins and let them loose, they was killing me, I got a scar to prove, got me paralyzed, I could even barely move. Out the way I took the pain again.
Hey, y'all. Welcome. Boy, are we rolling. I mean, we're into the first quarter, near the end of the first quarter of 2025, season 3, episode 3. We just are going to jump right into it. So I'm going to start with our cover-up fact that the current administration, we all know who and what that is, has signed 87 executive orders since taking office January 20th of this year. Some of them include protecting the Second Amendment rights. We understand that, but also, question how gun violence is affecting our communities and our schools, our young people. Establishment of the White House Faith Office, like what is that? Eradicating anti-Christian bias. So that actually goes with the first one is like, okay, now we understand what the Faith Office is about. One of the things that we'll delve into a little deeper later on in the show, restoring the death penalty and protecting public safety. That's definitely loaded. Ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and prefacing. So we have the link available for y'all. It's in the chat. It'll be on the site. It'll be scrolling. But also, too, when you go to that site, you're going to click on the link that is highlighted with these titles, and you'll be able to read the full the order and how it reads and how it's intended. So we're going to keep the list going, keeping men out of women's sports. That's another, loaded order there. Ending the radical indoctrination of K through 12 schooling. Interesting. One of the other things that we saw actually when this administration was sworn in on January 20th was the declassification of records concerning the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So we'd love to have more conversations on that. I don't know how I got that on there twice, but restoring the names that honor American greatness. So I know that's going to impact a lot of our allies and hub members in the South. And then this was I put it on here for shits and giggles because it was just funny that you actually made an executive order ending the procurement and forced use of paper straws. I think that's code for fuck the environment. But anyway, in the truest sense of the word, of the movement, of what allowed us to be here today, that allowed Purely Speculation to even be, a thing, is none other than my brother, my friend, my comrade, my ally, family, Raj Jayadev, co-founder of SVD Bug, and co-coordinator of the National Participatory Defense Movement. Welcome, Raj. We're twinning today, so not only is he my brother, he's my twin. So thank you. You've been on the show. You've been in other spaces that we've been in, and I am truly grateful that you are always available for us and the movement. As busy as you are and all the things that you've got going on, you still make time for us, for the movement, and people that, are in this fight with us. For that, I say greetings, peace and blessings. Thank you, all of that stuff. So welcome.
Thanks so much, Heather. I mean, it means the world for me to be able to just be on in space with you physically or virtually, and what you all have built with purely speculation is incredible. And so I'm just honored to be in conversation with you, and always great to see you and have a conversation.
Yes, I'm super, super excited. And I know you probably have some thoughts swirling around in that big brain of yours about these executive orders, but we'll get to that later. But in true spirit of participatory defense and its origin, what are some of your memories of your earliest activism as an organizer? I mean, we're still young people, so I'm gonna say as a young person that what brings to mind? Has it always been rooted in participatory defense or this type of movement work, or did it start out where you like protecting kids from bullies and saving little animals and stuff like that?
No, I think participatory defense is rooted in debugism or debug philosophy.
Mhm.
And debugism, at least my entry point into it, is rooted in the experiences that predated or maybe was waiting for debug to be born. And it's wild, think about this, because I'm in the basement of debug right now, and upstairs we have all the covers. We have the covers of all our old magazines.
Mhm.
And
I have pictures of those.
yeah, and this morning I just happened to be like looking at the first couple of the issues, which were about really the origins of debug, which was about what temporary work was like in a Silicon Valley that was trying to create a mythology about what the new tech economy was and who it was for. And that magazine was really talking about the experiences of people that were working on assembly lines, warehouses, doing the physical labor of the new tech economy that most people thought were just made by robots. Didn't realize it was young people, it was immigrants, it was people that were a lot of ways excluded from the benefits of the tech economy, but the reason why the tech economy existed. And
Right.
I bring that up just because that's my earliest, most poignant moment of meaningful, transformative organizing work was
Right.
when I finished college and I went to India because it's a long story, but I was in India for a few months, and what I didn't realize was I was absorbing a different understanding of what movement work was over there by movement leaders, just by observing how they moved and what they were doing. And so when I came back to San Jose, I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I was going to go back to India, but I realized when you're not in college and you say you want to go somewhere, like people like shrug and they're like, who cares? Like, get there on your own. So I didn't have a way to get there the way I did as a college student. When you're in college, they're like, okay, great. let me see how we can fundraise for you.
You'll make this work.
Second you're done, like no one cares. So I was temping, and I was temping for Manpower. Do they have that out in Pennsylvania?
I think so. That sounds familiar.
At that time, it was the largest temporary employment agency in the country. And
Mhm.
ironically, my mother temped at Manpower when she came to this country. And so they placed me in the back of Hewlett Packard where I was assembling laser jet printers. And why that's sort of a really significant moment for me was, one is I got to see another side of Silicon Valley that people didn't want to be shared.
Right.
And I got to see what people that weren't just tempering, that was their only source of income and employment, was working those jobs that was sub-livable wages, no health benefits, no unions, and was dangerous because of the chemicals involved and the equipment and that kind of thing.
Right.
And what I remember was understanding that experience different because of what I saw in India, in terms of what movement could be, the expansiveness of it. And so when we were getting shorted on paychecks, and normally what would happen, and this happens everywhere, like someone gets short on paycheck, you just individually address that issue with the manager or the supervisor. And it happened to me, it happened to other people. For me, it didn't really that matter as much. I didn't have kids or anything like that. But for other folks, if they're getting shorted hours, that meant they weren't putting food on the table for the kids. It was a serious issue. And management really didn't care. But what I saw were people wanting to organize. And so we had a little organizing campaign. It was the first like independent labor activity, I think, in that area, at least certainly at that plant, but no union, no external leadership, all coming from within. So we I remember I made a petition at my house, brought it back, and people would sneak into because we're in the manufacturing side of the company. Someone there would sneak into the office area, use the copy machine, print out copies, and then they'd figure out who was working the different shifts on the different lines.
Mm-hmm.
Self-organizing in a way,
Yes.
I don't think we saw was possible, but it reminded me of the sort of the depth of organizing that I saw in India.
Mm-hmm.
The part where it became really, it came together for me was I remember, so I was working on one assembly line, and at the end of the line, like people get bored. So like when they get bored, people like poke fun with each other, they fight,
Right.
all kinds of stuff. And these two guys started fighting by the box load area. And when fights, not like serious fights, there's like jawing at each other, that kind of thing,
Right.
each other. And so it's like this one break of boredom, the monotony of just doing your piece on the assembly line for 8 hours a day with the machine. So people stop and watch it like it's pay-per-view. And so like everyone's circling around, like laughing, having a good time.
Right.
And I remember this guy, Simon, who was Southern Indian. He's from Kerala, which is a socialist country in India. He was the one guy that was not like getting into it. And after the fight was broken up, I asked him why. And he said, back home, we would never fight each other. We'd only fight management.
Mm.
And that happened at the time we were building this organizing drive on the in the shop floors. And so it gave me a different orientation of what was possible. And he would tell me these stories of like, when they would want to demand something, they wouldn't just make a petition. They would surround the management office and not let them go home until they got their demands met.
Hostage.
So there was a depth. And then what I saw in India was that there was a scale. Like I'd heard of strikes and labor strikes before.
Mm-hmm.
But in India, they had something they would call a band, which was a citywide strike. So not just your company, not just your industry, but there was a solidarity among workers across the divisions of labor,
Right.
that understood the power of collective action. And so that was sort of, in a lot of ways, like the moment in time was the coming together of what I saw in India versus, and also what I saw in application from people from other countries here in the U.S. that blew my mind in what activism and what organizing had the potential to be.
Right. And I will say from personal experience, you model that to a T. And I used to say that was like West Coast energy, but that is really the philosophy. Because me, I'm from East Coast. I'm ready to fight, right? I'm always ready to fight. Yeah. And it's like, you come with this wise, and I don't even want to say soft spoken, but just this, way of speaking that, really is calming and affirming and redirecting, to the appropriate fight with the appropriate, tools. And it's like, and I'm always like, okay, like, and I just stomp off like a little kid, you know what I mean? Like get my way. But it's like that is, you just described what I would describe as West Coast energy is actually the methodology and the spirit of which, how to really organize effectively. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't know what we were doing, but like what's so interesting, like I learned a lot from folks on that assembly line about organizing, and
Mhm.
the thing I learned from my coworker from Kerala was similar to what I learned from a woman named Dorothy who's from the US in the South. And
Mhm.
she would always talk about, like, she was older than me, and she would always talk about the civil rights movement and about how she would be marching in the streets. So when all this stuff was happening about wage issues, she had this reference point, just the way he had a reference point of Kerala. He had this
Mhm.
reference point of collective action that was experiential. Like, she knew the potential. So, because I always wondered when this petition would go around, right? What it meant was people would have to sign their name. And
Mhm.
what I didn't know, and as a temp worker, you're at risk of getting fired all the time because
Right.
there's no union, there's no collective bargaining, none of that stuff. So you're vulnerable all the time.
Right.
So I was wondering, like, what would give people the sense of confidence that they would sign their name? And I assumed what they would write was just like employee. I really thought they weren't going to sign their name. And it's wild talking about this because I hadn't thought about this in a long time, but
Mhm.
people were looking internally as to what the leaders on the line were going to do, and then they would follow that. And
Right.
Dorothy was our line leader. So she was it. And so when she signed her name, other people signed their name. And
Mhm.
and I remember asking her, like, why'd you sign your name instead of employee, swing shift or
Right.
whatever? And she said, because I want them to know it's me. And that in some ways is like a pretty audacious thing, which is
Mhm.
saying, instead of running from having a target on your back, putting on the front of your chest and
Right.
saying, okay, powerful corporation that crushes workers, that is part of the most powerful industry known to man.
Mhm.
I'm going to challenge you, and I got these other people with me. That was a different orientation, and that kind of forever recalibrated, I think, what I thought was possible through collective organizing.
That is super powerful, and I'm not shocked at all that we're going to have like tons of gems being dropped tonight. So if y'all not watching, it sucks to be you, because this is going to be a very powerful hour. And so I thank you for sharing that, because a lot of us, I just had my first international travel experience maybe 2 years ago. Never been out. I mean, I've been to like the Caribbean and Mexico, but never overseas, another continent. And we don't think about these things in other countries. We just think about it as tourist destinations, or maybe somebody's going home to visit family or whatever. But thank you for bringing that into context, and how people do put themselves on the line for this work, and for change, and for better living for themselves and their families, challenging corporate giants and all those people that are, again, another oppressive system, right? More so that this is your livelihood. Like, when you're talking about crushing workers, yeah, you're crushing families if you take away their livelihood. So the threat is real. When it comes to that. And so, with that being said, doing all this work and creating debug and getting off the line, and now, working in your element, what would you say would be one of your most memorable accomplishments?
Oh my Lord.
There's so many. Let me think.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, none of them. I should preface this. I mean, it'll sound like, but corny. But I think it, because you know our philosophy. But in our field, there's no such thing as an individual accomplishment, and
Right.
everything is done through the collective. And every time we are able to get someone home to stop an incarceration or bring them home from an extended one, that is always like mind blowing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And like just yesterday, Norelli, who you know, a longtime debug organizer, I sat in a chair and watched her give a presentation to public defenders about how they could tap into participatory defense hubs to win pretrial freedom for people that otherwise they didn't want to take the risk of. They
Right.
didn't have, like in Dorothy's spirit, that kind of audacious confidence to
Mm-hmm.
take on the improbable. And I'm watching her speak, knowing she brought her dad home from a life sentence a year ago.
Yep.
From a time when she had nothing, I don't think she had any sort of, she didn't know what debug was, like had no
Right.
idea she was gonna do stuff with other families or in courts. But there was a moment in her life where her father was gonna be taken from, like the grandfather of her kids was gonna be taken from them. And she'd be at arraignment court and they'd say no bail. The only money bail they put on her was $2 million on our dad. They didn't have $2 million.
Right.
And she kept working, got him home without having to pay the money bail. And then he started working on the case and they proved his innocence and he got his case dismissed. It took 6 years.
Right.
But he came to every weekly meeting. And as you know, the pace of this is pretty slow. So it's not like you have an update every week.
Right.
And he'd also just want to be a kind of source of encouragement for others. And then he still came after he won his case. And so, like, as the story goes, and this goes with hubs everywhere, like for that other family that's just starting the journey, to see him in the room physically and know that he was a name on that board in the way that we organized was everything.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Norelli comes to mind because that family took that fight with such grace. Grace, because he was wrongfully charged, was being wrongfully prosecuted, was facing literally getting his life taken from him. And
Right. Yeah.
and all they did was keep working for his freedom. So anyways, that's certainly something that comes to mind.
I love it. And, when we have our conversations and we just start to, process things and digest them. And, as you're describing the collective and just how it functions in different spaces, like, and by design, you know what I'm saying? Because the foundational learnings of participatory defense is elevating, our community, building the movement in the community, family focused and family centered, and building them up. And it's like a collective mindset isn't necessarily the normal mindset, right? And so that trust-based process, it is, we are literally changing the mindsets of people. And when you think about that, we have 50 hubs planted across this country, all thinking and changing and believing and functioning in this way, that now it's just going to spread out, and we're going to see that systems change that we're ultimately looking to see. We're also going to see the change in humanity. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not just how we function, but it's just like now it becomes a way of life that there is no I in team, right? It's all of us. It's like everybody has a lane and we work together and we, do all this together, so that we will probably get back to what we were originally born to be like, right? Is, to function as one, to work together, to, it's not about I have more than you. Like that's a taught, behavior. It's not something that is instinctive of human beings, to be isolated and separate and trying to get more than you. So, and me watch you suffer and struggle when I just I'm hoarding all of this abundance. Like, it makes no sense. We weren't built like that. We weren't designed by our creator to think and function like that. And so, like, when I say I will drop everything that I'm doing for debug and participate to my PD family, that's why, because that's how we get down. That's how we function. Like, that is more so much of an organic being than just this, oh, how can I get what I need? You know what I mean? It's like, how can we get what we need so that we're all healthy and we're all thriving and we're all doing well?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so putting a name to it, calling it participatory defense or whatever it is, like it just has so many implications, not just in the movement space, but in people's lives personally. How we've talked about how now we're working it in the education space. We're going to bring people into the health space, in civics, our elected officials, all these things where we can impact, real systemic change, but also just healthier communities.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So you guys are just so dope. And I always say, I know this was y'all goal at the outset, right? This was your goal, is for this all to happen, but through these elaborate yet simple, processes and exercises and just, community engagement and letting people do their thing, that ultimately, all of this was going to happen. This was the ultimate outcome, right?
Right, yeah. I wish. Shoot. Would have saved a lot of headache if we knew. A lot of trial and error could have been avoided. But I think the other thing too, like what you're speaking to, Heather, like that is one of the things that for sure we didn't anticipate. And then even when you're in it, you don't have the time to look at it, but you can reflect back on it. Like our stuff, like if you looked at it mechanically from the outside, like participatory defense is about like the courts. Like that's one way to look at it. Like we're interrupting, a racist, archaic court system by the infusion of the agency of those who otherwise were supposed to be subjected to it, and changing it. And that's amazing. Like that's the reason why folks like Norelli's dad's home. Like there's that side, but the other side to it that is hard to communicate, that I don't think I haven't really put in words much, is like in a lot of ways, like the courts was just the excuse. It's like it was just the arena for us to do, just for us to flex or exercise our community ties and our community connections and our community love for one another, and what it means for us, like what it means to us for our own individual like life journeys and transformations. Like the court was just the backdrop canvas, but really the real action, like where that is happening, it's happening independent of whatever the background is. It's just communities, it's just people seeing the potential of themselves, self-determining who they want to be, where they want to be, seeing it in one another, wanting to support each other to get to that destination. At the same time, they're supporting you. And yeah, it could be the backdrop, the excuse for that could have been a court case, could have been family court stuff, could be some organizing campaign, but in some ways that's only the stuff that is that breaks above water. But what happens below water is really the special part of it that is hard to put a finger on.
Right. I love it. So it just, it reveals itself, through different actions. I've been interviewing a slew of interns, and not like first year undergrad that needs certain number of hours. These are like experienced, seasoned students that are looking for an opportunity to gain work experience, to be in the field, boots on the ground. And when I talk about the work that we do, we talk about, these are the things, like you said, the arena, this is where we fight this is where we fight that, this is how we do this is how we organize here, the systems that are in place to make all this stuff work. But at the end of the day, ultimately, it's to change policy, to, kind of create the world we want to live in.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's like, wow, that's like really, I'll use your word, audacious. Like that is a really big, lofty goal. But you know what? Every day we are closer and closer and closer to achieve it. I mean, I think just personally, we're living it every day because we're actively doing the work and we're living in community with, our folks. But on the grand scheme of things, like in the United States or in this world globally, like more and more people, especially when we talk to young people, that is my ultimate favorite thing to do, is talk to young people before their brains are cemented, that they know about this, they hear about it, they think about it, and hopefully they add this to their toolbox of how to navigate the world and or their profession, whether they're going into law or whatnot. And so, this just brings forth, and I love having these conversations with you about, where participatory defense is going, what it's done, how it's impacting people. All of the principles are just so relevant and on point. Endurance, like you said, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. You know what I mean? It took 6 years, and people are like, "Oh my gosh!" We just had a young lady come home the other day. She just texted me, so I don't know exactly when she came home. Maybe it might have been last week. But she has been held pre-trial for over 19 months. Pre-trial, no hearing. They just keep saying that she's incompetent. They're trying to do all these things. Ultimately, they forced her to take a deal so that she could come home because they weren't gonna let her go. They literally kidnapped her because even what she was charged with, she had already got time served for. You know what I mean? So literally, you're just holding her hostage because you want her to sign on the paper saying, "Yeah, I did that." So she's home and she is ready to get in the fight, get in the thick of it. She's going to meet Anna. We're all going to meet her on Saturday and get her in at the ground level. I understand she's traumatized from that experience, but this is a safe space. Get it all out here. Let's get you focused and get you in the fight. And, we've got one more comrade to add to the army. So it just is so exciting and so telling. And so all that was all mushy and lovely and all of that. We're going to take this brief commercial break. We're going to hear some stuff some other powerful nuggets that you always drop on us. But then we're going to get into some executive orders and some really challenging stuff. But I think we already have started working on the solutions that you kind of, started bringing to our attention about 6 months ago. So we're going to take this commercial break. We'll come back and we're going to dig into these executive orders.
Sounds good.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. How's everyone doing? All right. It's a beautiful image to see everyone here and what y'all built and the community that you're building. And it's a deep honor for me to be in spirit with you all and be in presence with you all. So can I get a round of applause for the amazing movement work that Heather and the team have built? And look, it's one thing to do anything consistently and excellently for 5 years. Yes. It is a whole different thing to do liberation work for 5 years and to build and to fight against the norm of incarceration, of racism, of slavery. And that is what Reuniting Bail Fund is a fortress against. This is a historic organization, part of a historic movement that is changing not just Montgomery County, not just Pennsylvania, but this country, humbly and proudly. And I want you all to acknowledge that, to know that well after this evening is done. Now, I want to say I first met Heather, must have been a decade ago, right? And we were messing around with this idea of participatory defense. Is there a way? Do we have the audacity to believe that people themselves, that families themselves, actually have the power, the intellect, and the capacity to fight back against incarceration and bring loved ones home? And it was an experiment in justice. It was an experiment in the audacious. And I could say now, a decade later, we have the proof in the fact that there are families literally reunited because of the work that's coming out of Norristown. And I know.
Yes, that was a historic night. And thank you again for coming out. So back to these executive orders and the fortress. We what do we want to? Have you given any thought to any of them? Have you paid attention? I don't want to say not paid attention, but given any thought to any of them and how they relate to the movement work?
I mean, honestly, it's hard for me to keep up. I mean, like I go to bed at night with one executive order I just learned about that I'm thinking I got to wake up and we got to figure out what to do about it. And when I
Right.
wake up, there's 5 more. So I guess I don't know if there's a specific thing I look at. I think it just feels like, as I'm sure it does for others, is we are living in this ever accelerating world of authoritarianism and trying to figure out how to get some stable footing to conceive of how to fight back in a meaningful way. And
Right.
I think that's intentional too. I think the rapidity of the attacks from the administration is, I think it's machine gun style for a reason, and I think it's to keep us disoriented and off balance and
Right.
in the defensive. So I don't know if there's a specific one that I've been focusing on. It more just trying to do 2 things at one. One is like put out fires as they come, to the doorstep, and then 2, also not trying to give gas or react to everything that
Right.
strategically I think the other side, so to speak, wants us to be doing.
Right. I think people are really struggling. At least I've seen it, and it made sense to me. I was like, yeah, that's really what I'm feeling. Is that they're trying to balance being informed, but also not being reactionary, being paranoid. Like you said, trying to run around and be off kilter, trying to manage when there's they're machine gunning these executive orders out at us daily. And it's like trying to remain informed, but also protecting your mental health and all of that stuff. So, because some of them will be triggering, some of them, don't make any sense, like the ones with the paper straws. But I'm sure there are, and I'm not against the environment and, tree huggers and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, I'm sure that will have a more profound impact on people that work in that space. They understand exactly intimately what that executive order means. You know what I mean? Where, other ones may have more impact on us. The Second Amendment rights, rolling back DEI stuff. All of that, like it's, and people don't understand. And we, I see videos of, other folks that voted for this administration, and then they're shocked at what's happening. And I'm kind of curious, is that real? Are people really shocked? Are they really, or is this just kind of, videos for likes that they're just acting like they didn't know?
I mean, it is really tough because the speed of these really like transformations of the country. I mean, anything that we assumed was protected is not.
Right.
And in some matter, for us that swim in certain waters, like a lot of us knew a lot of these protections were artificial to begin with, regardless of the administration.
Right.
But so like even like there's a lot of these things are contradictory to, say, the Constitution, and so there's a lot of people that are like, wait, that's unconstitutional. You can't do that because this history and this legacy says this.
Right.
But none of those things are unmovable, apparently. And
right.
When I talk about the speed of how these attacks are coming, I remember we got reached out to by like a local news station. I'm sure you do too. Like whenever one of these executive order comes down, they're like, let's just call whatever the local group is and
get there.
And so a lot of times, like for me, just because I'm not as plugged in, I'm always looking down at like whatever we're dealing with right in the moment. So
I'm
not tuned in a lot of times with what's happening. And so a lot of times I'm getting the news from the news person asking us a question on what our opinion is on the thing. So I'm like, tell me a little bit more. And they're telling us about, there's an executive order that is going to allow for the deportation of students who who speak out against against whatever
Yes.
the government feels is something you
Absolutely.
can't change. So that was
Absolutely.
like 3 days ago. And then, like I said, wake up a couple of days later, and then there's a Palestinian activist, Columbia University student, or former student, who's in deportation orders based on that executive order that, like, we all literally just heard about locally here a couple of days ago. So there is a rawness. There's a rawness to it that is really something that causes a lot of anxiety and
Mhm.
a requirement to act. And then secondly, like, for me, the other part of it that's so wild is, like, there's such buffoonery. Like, when I see the people that are in the administration or giving the speeches and part of the cabinet, it's cartoonish. Like, I don't understand how these people have any decision-making power.
Right.
But it is a litmus test of what the United States is in its sort of like unregulated, truest form, at least the government.
Right.
And it's so it's a reminder of how we got to navigate,
Absolutely. It also, and when you said how prior to this administration, we believed that the Constitution was like the Ten Commandments. It was
Right.
etched in stone. Like, this is it. You don't, go against it. You don't change it. You don't violate it. It's like the word of God, right? And so now with this administration, it's like, it just, if I didn't want to rip up my script, I'd rip this paper up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, just rip it to shreds, like they don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And it's like, and back to, when we had the retreat with, to reflect on a lot of this stuff, we had an exercise that we were given a set of tools. And that was it. And then given a set of tools, and this is what I want you guys to create. And we were broken up into 3 sections: East Coast, West Coast, and the South. And we were all, in our respective spaces, and we did the task, right? Was to create this fashion show. And 2/3 of the group, East Coast and West Coast, stayed within the confines of the tools that we were given. So essentially, we held that Constitution up. We held those rules up like it was gospel, like it was the 10 Commandments. And the South came in there. They didn't use a motherfucking tool that they were given. And they came and they won the fashion show. They tore it up. They said, it was such a powerful moment. It was such a powerful visual. And like you'll say, it wasn't intended, but like, what we got out of that is exactly what you just said relative to the Constitution. And now we're looking at the country, and that, like, once people, you're seeing who likes chaos.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And that's what's being created. But also, too, not just that, one of the things that and some people may not like what I'm about to say, or they may agree, but may have to process it a little bit. But like you said, some of these asylums were in name only, right? They weren't really real. They were just in name, making it look like, we really cared about Black people, and we really cared about people with disabilities and all these marginalized groups, right? But it is actually, when the Bible says the tearing down of strongholds, that is literally what is happening. And we never expected that the Department of Education would be a stronghold. But when we look at it, and we all understand that the allocation of funding is not fair or equitable, that, Social Security, like all these other Medicaids and all these other things, they are not designed really to help and uplift and elevate or equip people. They are really to lullaby you to sleep, keep you complacent. We literally have people that are living on $10,000 a year. How in the hell do you live on $10,000 a year? And we're talking about our seniors, our most vulnerable people that literally have $10,000 a year. That's not even $1,000 a month.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that is what they have to live on. And so when we talk about the tearing down of strongholds, that's what I'm starting to see. It's starting to make sense. And while we want to hold on to those because we're saying, what about the vulnerable people that it's supposed to serve? What is it really serving them? In what capacity are they serving them? Are they really being allowed to exercise their full selves, right? Because we're giving them these things. But also, too, it's like we now have an opportunity, and I'm going to quote you, to define our era, right? This is the era that we're tearing down these strongholds. How do we build it back? How do we take, the nuggets that are out of this rubble, the good things that were within, or the good intentions that these things were supposed to have been built on, and build it so that it actually does what it's intended to do. And I think we're preparing those people. We might not be the constructors,
right,
but we are the ones that are now changing the thought process to the collective versus this capitalistic, individualistic, self-serving nature we're going back to. So when we build these institutions back or recreate whatever it is that we're looking to serve our community with, it will be a genuine, community oriented, uplifting, healthy system versus ones that's really designed to make you sick. Like with Big Pharma, they're not here to the healthcare system. They're not here to make you well. If you're well, then they're out of business.
right.
You know what I mean? They are not doing that. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. One is that fashion show was illustrative, I think, of the ingenuity and creativity that is in our communities. And yeah, we had no idea what was going to happen. We knew people were going to have fun with it and say something smart in the meantime, because it was about doing a fashion show that talked about the political moment and also how you are moving in that space. And the fact that, and you and Kiana, I think, were the folks that really named it after, which is another part of the sort of analytic process is doing the thing, but it's also translating what an intuitive feeling is into something describable, so that you could then break that down. And that's what you all did. Like the day after, you said, "Hey, look, the South went out of the box. The rest of us were limited to the tools that we were instructed to use." And none of us knew that was going to happen. But the way you all were investigating and interrogating the question as to why, I thought was really telling to where we are now, which is almost similar to kind of what I was talking about with Dorothy and the brother from Kerala, which is there was a point of reference of larger social imagination and movement that was going on. And so for the folks from the South that were at that gathering doing the activity, they were drawing upon a historical memory of the people that fought for historic change in those days and in those regions. And it wasn't that they even had a choice. It was just the only go-to move was to not be limited. And I think that instructed the way they were seeing what was possible. And I think that's kind of the way we need to see it now too, to your point, which is in some ways it was sort of a smart chess move, right? Like reducing these institutions of the United States that we were already critical of, systems that we were already critical of, but then you eliminate them, and then it repositions those of us that were critical of those systems, institutions, into a place where we feel we have to defend them, and so then the most we get is what we had, and to your point of like, what if we use this as a moment of reimagination of something new, by our own terms, not by what was sort of just placed as these are the tools you have to work from, is actually a really exciting moment to be in. And when we talked about, like, when you were talking about creating the era, like, for me, that came from really spending time with you all and the hub out with you, with the celebration, and with the bail fund, where I saw the spirit of what I brought back and thinking of as fortress building, in a time of chaos, as you describe it. But then I was thinking about, like, look, it's at some point it's going to be, there'll be 15 years that pass, whether we like it or not, whether we're here or not, whether we do anything proactively or not. But how in 15 years people will understand this moment, they'll know it as an era, and it will be an era that either happened to us or happened by us. And so, like, we lived through, those of us that have lived through it, there's plenty that did not survive it. We can look back at the eras that predated this moment as a way to understand that that's the dynamics of how time and history moves. And so we've lived through an era that was now understood as the war on drugs, new as the first generation of mass incarceration.
Right.
There was an era of the super predator, where every young Black and brown person was deemed as something non-human and something predatory. And then we had a legal system that then codified that into lifetime sentences for 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds. So we know what happens when we let go of the string and let the systems design the historical moment. But what that also means is that we are in a moment right now of fluidity, where things have not calcified as what they are, and
Right.
we have the potential to capitalize on the chaos and build something new on our terms. And that's sort of what I meant by, at least for me, what I think this feels like, of the time where we get to define our era rather than be defined by it.
Right. I love it. And that's exactly right. You just said it so much more eloquently and philosophically, that yes, it's like we do have an opportunity. And I think once folks kind of grasp that, like wrap their brains around it, digest it a bit, I think they will embrace it and figure out how they can impact it, help create it, help build it, help construct whatever it is that, like you said, works for us, that is designed to support and keep us safe and healthy, our communities, our children, everyone that is marginalized, that has been a victim of these systems. I think it's really an opportunity to do that. And I'm just super, super duper excited. We also have, I think the link is somewhere for the article that you wrote about building our fortress and defining the era. And it's like, do you have any thoughts of like what we would call it?
The era?
The era. It's like, what would it be? Like, we're still, in this primordial soup space, it's kind of mixing, and I'm sure there's more ingredients that are going to come, and it's like, how are we going to define ourselves and be bold in it? And so that'll be an exercise for the next convening, when we have maybe some younger minds.
But I think there's something really liberatory about even affording the space to think about what we would call it, versus what otherwise the current and the moment takes us, which is just reacting to whatever is coming our way.
Right.
So but maybe we'll let the South define it, and then we'll just
the South is something else. They are something else. Big ups to the South. Muffin, Imani, Nicola, Nola, Fox and Rob. Oh geez, Lil Muffin. Who was that?
The Atlanta crew.
Atlanta crew, Tia, what's her mom's name? Devon, and Bree. We don't call her. She was like, no, it's Bree.
Yeah.
Yes, that whole South crew. I mean, and you know, it's befitting because that is the birthplace of the civil rights movement, and they were not given any tools to work with. And so when we look at them and what they've done, like for the fashion show, they didn't use a single tool that was in that sugar cookie tin that I thought we were getting cookies.
Yeah.
And it was literally thread and string, and sticky notes and stickers and scissors and glue and glitter. And I don't think they used a single thing in that tin.
Not one.
You know, they made something so powerful, interpretive, out of foil that wasn't in the tin.
It wasn't even there.
You know, it wasn't even a thing. Like, so they went and got something and created something completely new, but was so profound that, I mean, I'm still talking about it. You know what I mean? And I'm still processing it and still just analyzing like everything that weekend really uncovered. And I hope that, you know, everyone that was there is doing the same thing. I believe they are, because, you know, there's no way that you could have been there and not still be processing that experience. And so I thank you all for that, and look forward to, you know, being able to share and, you know, with our younger hubs and have them experience the OGs and all of that. And, you know, again, contribute to defining our era, you know, because I'm sure they have a different perspective and a different viewpoint, vantage point of, you know, what all this looks like and what it means, you know, as a younger person with a different, you know, perspective, you know, versus the OGs. So I'm excited about that. And so we are at almost an hour. Oh goodness, we went from 30 minutes to like an hour and then 5 seconds.
Okay.
Like, wait, what? So my favorite part of the show, this segment, is the what the fuck moment. And so I'm sure there's tons that you can think of that you've experienced, but is there anyone in particular that kind of stands out that you'd like to share? It could be positive. Sometimes I say it all the time, like, what the fuck? They actually gave me some money to do this work. Like, what the fuck?
I have a really recent what the fuck moment, because I'm just writing on it right before I jumped on here.
Okay.
We have a mayor out here who's awful. San Jose mayor. I call him mass incarceration Matt. He's Matt Mahan. He's the mayor of San Jose, and he's been awful since he's came in office. Yesterday, he puts out a public statement about a policy that he's going to put to city council next week. And I know it because I get his newsletter, and the title of the newsletter is called "Holding Homeless People Accountable." And he is proposing that if a person who's houseless gets offered by the city to go to the shelter, which is often the last place anyone would want to be,
Right.
if they say no, that the city will arrest them and jail them. And so he's decided not to take on the forces that create homelessness, not the institutions,
Right.
Not the oligarchs of Silicon Valley that is sucking up all the resources and not paying.
Right.
He's decided that a homeless family living in a riverbed in San Jose is who the city hall needs to go after, and needs to be and who needs to be held accountable. So that was my what the fuck moment, because I don't even know how you could get that turned upside down and so perverse that you could openly say that and expect that people would be supportive of it.
Well, you know what we do here on Purely Speculation. So I'm going to find mass incarceration Matt's picture, and we are going to send it to artists, and we are going to create a whole thing about mass incarceration, Matt. We're going to put him on blast. So hopefully, you know what I mean, we will get all the San Jose Council and all them to understand that is the most ridiculous thing ever. We had not on that scale, and this is not my what the fuck moment. But there is a local senator here who just joined, and I'm not going to call her out yet because I haven't had a chance to talk to her yet. Just became the judiciary chair, and one of her memos, or wants to send to be a bill, is that, so we all know that it costs money. You have to put money on our incarcerated loved ones' books so that they can phone home, right? Phone calls from jail cost money. And so, but here in Pennsylvania is that there is a percentage of that money that's supposed to go towards capacity for those incarcerated individuals. So programs, whatever it is that they need. The money has not been going to those needs. Where the money's going, we don't know. How long it's been disappearing, we don't know. But her bill, I get it, but her bill is to make phone calls free. Okay. And I'm like, all right, well, I appreciate the free phone calls, but why are you not addressing the issue that the portion of the money that's supposed to go to inmate services is not going to inmate services? Yeah. What about that part?
Yeah. And where is it? Yeah.
Where is it? Like, you're just going to ignore it and just going to be, instead of fighting that fight, I'm just going to do away with that process altogether. All right, I appreciate it. But how many millions of dollars that was supposed to go towards inmate services went into somebody's pocket? Right. But we're just not going to address that. Yeah. But that is not my what the fuck moment. Okay. My what the fuck moment is that folks don't realize that there is a Protect Your People book out here on Amazon. Y'all have not purchased it. If you have not purchased it, what the fuck? Why don't you have your Protect Your People book yet? I have books. You can get it on Amazon. I'm sure Debug has books. If you're in a space that that some of us are going to be, I have a story. Raj is the author. There's a couple people on Hubs across the nation that have stories in there. If you get your book, get to a place where there's a hub, where there's going to be someone on a panel or in a space doing something, and get your book signed. Like, what the fuck? Get this book. This is part of the movement. This is part of history. Like, this episode right now, every episode has been historic. Almost a year to the day, Sharice was on the show.
No way, really? Oh my gosh.
Wow. A year. She was in March. She was Women's History. She was our Women's History Month a year ago. So it's like, what? And this is how crazy. Like you said, I'm always reading and shit. You were supposed to be in February.
That's true.
And your son's baseball team made the playoffs. So this is all this divine workings to have you here in March, which I didn't even think of until I'm like, what's going to be our commercial? Oh, we need to do Sharice. We did this, Women's History mashup from the women in the movement. Yeah. And we couldn't find it because I'm always last minute. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is literally a year to the month that she was on the show. It's awesome. That I love how the universe looks out for us, like gives us these divine things and just all these little gems and blessings. Like, you can't make it up. I didn't plan this. I was mad as hell with it. Not mad, but I was disappointed because we were trying to do something new and kind of get ahead of things and try to organize me, and it didn't work. It didn't work, and here we are in March. But look, a year later, we have the other fabulous second half of the Debug team and founders, and y'all are just, I love y'all to life. You guys have no idea how special and important you all are. The entire Debug family, all 50 plus hubs and everybody in it, they are my brothers and sisters. Now, I found my birthday twin at the gathering this week at Little Gerard. We have to share.
Oh yeah.
Had the same birthday, so now we've got young soldiers, and I have to send them a birthday present and all this great stuff. But yeah, it's like, imagine that. Like, we couldn't couldn't have planned it because I tried to plan it differently.
Right.
And so Cerise was not the last episode, but shout out to our Black History Month guest was our sister, our board president, Mighty Yvonne Platts, and she is just a pioneer. Oh yeah, a pioneer, and her Fannie Lou Hamer rendition is just spot on, and I just appreciate her and all the work that she's doing. She's just super, super dope. And yeah. And big ups to our Love Bonds Date Night Extravaganza. We couldn't do our in-person because Valentine's Day was on a Friday, and it just wasn't going to happen. And so we had loads of local eateries and playeries and things like that. We've got movie tickets and restaurants and bowling and Dave and Buster's, all types of fun stuff. And they really came out, and it was just a fun thing to do. So we try to see about doing that, and just like, follow, share on all of our social media. Raj, you are the dopest. I don't know if I forget anything else. I say all that to say peace and love. I love you so much. Don't hang up because we're going to get out of here, but we're going to chat back in.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Purely Speculation. If you learned something, share something. Please like, follow, and share this show. The more our communities know, the more they are empowered, and the faster we can create change. Purely Speculation would not be made possible without the generous support of the Community Justice Exchange, the Health Sparks Frank E. Boston Black Justice Fund, Philadelphia Foundation, and Reform Alliance. Thank you. Booyah!
Intuition different, already lived and dreamt it. Visions make my vision clear as I'm jogging through this fog of life. I be fog lights with the fog set, body and I'm all set. Baby, can you be my Cardi B on an offset? Toast we got it, self we build it.